gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me. We'll make a film about a man that's sad and lonely, and all I gotta do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can't never tell. The movie's gonna make me a big star, 'cause I can play the part so well. Well, I hope you come to see me in the movie. Then I know that you will plainly see the biggest fool that's ever hit the big time, and all I gotta do is act naturally. We'll make the scene about a man that's sad and lonely, and begging down upon his bended knee. I'll play the part, but I won't need rehearsing. All I'll have to do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can't never tell. The movie's gonna make me a big star, 'cause I can play the part so well. Well, I hope you come to see me in the movie. But then I know that you will plainly see the biggest fool's ever hit the big time, and all I gotta do is act naturally.
On October 26, 2017, Dan Hinnon interviewed Mike Boggio III, president of Michael Entertainment Group, MEG. During the interview, Mr. Boggio discussed how he met David Crowley, the alleged $30 million deal, and when negotiations with the Gray State Project ended. You ready for this? Hello, Hollywood. Mike Boggio III met David Crowley through a mutual friend. The mutual friend connected us together, so we set up a meeting with David in California. I talked to David numerous times on the telephone prior to our first meeting, so that's how we got together. In May of 2014, David Crowley met with the Michael Entertainment Group in Los Angeles, California. It was a very promising project, Boggio told Hannon. David wrote the first go-around of the screenplay. We went through it thoroughly, made numerous changes, and advised David to make numerous changes. At first, we were taking it to the big screen, Boggio continued. And then, as we thought about it, we figured, how can we pack in all this information in a 2-hour or 2.5-hour film? Let's take it to television and have a series made out of it, which would have been a lot better for the concept of David's idea. Without specifically naming names, Mr. Boggio commented on the actors considered for the Gray State Project. We were talking about hiring some pretty substantial A-list actors to fulfill some of the roles in the project. 2 months earlier, on March 8, 2014, David had stated that Sean Stone wanted a role in the future project. Quote, Sean Stone, yeah, that one, apparently wants a role in Gray State. Mike Boggio thought that David's version of Gray State would be a great A&E show. It'd be a great cable network television show that could spin off into a film. A&E is also where Eric Nelson's documentary was eventually released. David was always very mature, Boggio told Hannon, very professional, very kind and courteous and outgoing and excited. That's the key word. Mike called David's excitement about the project phenomenal. The original setting for the Gray State movie was in the Midwest Minnesota area, but MEG felt the movie setting needed to be nationwide, coast to coast, north to south. The $30 million deal. We were negotiating with David at the time, Mike Bosio told Dan Hinnon. We were talking about budgets for the film. We were talking about getting into production. Like I said, we had a list of A-list actors that I'm not going to even mention in this interview, and we talked about a $25 to $30 million budget. We could easily see the budget in this film being a $25 to $30 million budget. On May 23, 2014, David Crowley posted an update about the deal with Michael Entertainment Group. Quote, "It just happened. I'm not sure how many details I can divulge at this point, but Gray State will be optioned within the next 2 weeks at a major budget and connected with A-list talent. We are connected with the producer who above all else wants to preserve the film's pro-liberty ideals. This is all we could have hoped for and more. Thank you all for being our strongest selling point. Let's make a movie." So there were negotiations, Bosio explained. We were actually trying to option a screenplay. When we option a screenplay, we option a screenplay for a certain amount of time. I think we were going for 24 months, if I remember right. And within that 24 months, we had to get into production with the film. Otherwise, the option goes back to David. So that's what our negotiations were with David at the time. Mr. Bosio then clarified, when we talk about $25 to $30 million, that's what we budgeted for the film project. That's what we budgeted for everything to do from start to finish. As far as MEG's last conversation with David went, according to Mike Bosio, it was sometime in September of 2014, and those negotiations continued until David died. We actually met face-to-face in Hollywood, Bosio relayed to Hinnon, sat down right on Sunset Boulevard. Sometime in that time frame with David, David was out in California, flew out for the night, just to come to sit down with us to discuss the updates on the screenplay and discuss the concept and everything else. So that's when we sat down and he actually made a new trailer. We're sitting in there watching the trailer, and then we discussed, hey, let's think about taking this to television. And we gave him the reason why. You get picked up by a network, and it was just off the heels of Sons of Anarchy leaving that network. So we figured this could be a good spin-off for the network that Sons of Anarchy was on. And it would pick up a demographic of Sons of Anarchy. So we talked to him about numbers and statistics and discussed, if we take this to a series, then not only do you have a series, it can play out longer, then at the end of the series it can go to the big screen. And he was excited about it. He was open-minded about it and thought it was a great idea. So I don't know where the whole depression comes into play when it comes to regards to making Gray State Network. In the beginning of David Crowley's connection to MEG, we put out an offer to David to option the contract, said Bosio, which would have given him some money up front, and then we would have went and ran with the film project or the television project. David would have been a producer on the film, so he would have been paid to be a producer on the film. And then he would have reaped some of the benefits of whatever the film grossed. We all would have. David had an idea, and it was a very, very, very strong idea, and that's why we all got together. Asked about the allegations that David walked away from the project, or if MEG decided not to go forward with the project, Mike Bosio seemed to deny both allegations. We didn't fire David, or we didn't get rid of David, however that went, and he didn't walk away from us. I mean, there was never any of that, and I don't even know where those two ideas came from. Nothing to my knowledge. Again, we never told David to get lost. I tried contacting David after our September meeting or discussion. I tried contacting David for months to discuss things. I didn't hear from him or anything. So I was getting a little nervous myself. Not nervous for our business transactions. David and I became friends. Not only were we business acquaintances, but we became friends. I called him on the holidays and wished him a happy Thanksgiving to him and his family. I did that numerous times until I heard the very strange, disturbing news. So when Mike received news of David's death, he was in total shock. I didn't believe it. So Christmas comes, Bosio continued. December 2014, I guess it is, comes around. I called David on Christmas, around Christmas time, to wish him and Camille and the baby happy holidays. I went out of town for New Year's. When I got back, I called him to wish him a happy New Year, and then I still didn't hear anything. So I felt it was kind of weird. So I contacted a mutual friend that David and I both had and asked this person. Let me take a step backward. Prior to that, I called this person saying, man, I haven't heard from David in at least a month. Have you heard from him? He's like, nah, but it's the holidays. You guys got him in the studio writing. When he gets into that writing mode, he shuts down and he secludes himself and he just focuses on what he has to do. I'll run by and see him and see the family and see how things are going. And I'm like, all right, cool. So like another month goes by, and then after New Year's, after I left David a Happy New Year's message on his voicemail, I called this person and said, man, I still haven't heard from him. Did you go over there for the holidays? The mutual friend had not gone to David's house yet. And then like the next day, the guy calls me and says, did you hear? And when he told me, I was in total shock. Owning the Gray State franchise. Who owns the rights? Who owns them now? If the deal with MEG was only with David, where did Danny Mason fit in? I have no idea what David and Danny's deals were, said Boggio. I can't answer to that. We had nothing behind that. We didn't have anything to do with that whatsoever. We didn't advise David to do that, so I don't even know why. I know that was brought up when we were doing our interview with Eric Nelson, but other than that, I have no idea why David did that, to be honest with you. Dan Hinnon then asked if the script still had value. Well, when all this transpired, Boggio answered, we backed away. We backed away because of all the conspiracy theories and everywhere else. For a long time, for at least over a year, we didn't even discuss it. We just figured it was too toxic to even be involved with. Whoever got involved, I know since then they've made something. I know there were a couple guys out there that contacted me saying, hey man, we made this thing, we want you to see it, what's your thoughts? We never even got involved. Then we had a conversation at least a year, if not a little longer than a year after David's death, with David's dad, and I think it was Danny Mason. I think it was. I can't remember for sure, but we had a conversation with them about picking this thing back up and running with it because as far as I remember, David's dad got the rights to the film. Or got the rights to David's estate. So he wanted to do something with it. We started talking with David's dad and then nothing ever transpired out of it. 4 months after the bodies were found, Dan informed Mike Boggio III, Danny Mason was already in process of getting the Gray State trademarked with an attorney. At the end of the interview, Mike Boggio made his view very clear. We always had a pleasant experience with David. We never saw any downside to David whatsoever. Very, very motivated young man. It was actually a pleasure working with David. He took all of our ideas and all of our thoughts and took them to heart and never balked about it whatsoever to us. If he did something on his own time or around someone else, we were never privy to that whatsoever. Please consider watching the full interview with Mike Boggio III posted here.
All right, that sounds good. Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is October 26th, 2017, and I'm going to be interviewing Michael Boggio III, president at Michael Entertainment Group, MEG. Hello, Michael.
How are you today?
Good, good. Very good this morning. Glad to be able to get on the line and speak with you. You've got some important, I think, pieces of the puzzle that relate to this entire David Crowley case that has gotten very strange over the last couple of years. Not only the alleged murder-suicide, but the aftermath and everything else here that went along with it. But more importantly, Eric Nelson has made a documentary called A Gray State, and I would like to get your honest thoughts on the movie, on the documentary, and first and foremost, have you seen it?
I have not seen it yet.
Okay. And just for the listeners out there, the movie's is not out in theaters. It's not public yet. It has made its rounds through a series of film festivals and whatnot, and private screenings. But so you have not seen it, and now are you in the film?
We are. Yeah, my partner and myself are.
Okay.
We did an interview with Eric Nelson out in California at least a year and a half ago. So it's been quite a while.
Oh, I see. So 2015, roughly.
Yeah, I think it was July of 2015.
Okay. Yeah, they came out. They interviewed us, myself, in Minneapolis here, and that was June of 2016. So
I was going to say it's 2016 we did.
Oh, okay.
July of 2016. Yeah.
Okay, good. So they made their rounds and they did that. How was that? How was that process, and what type of questions did they come up with?
They just asked us questions about our affiliation with the project and how we got involved with David and where it led to, and how long we knew David, how many meetings did we have with David, and pretty much what transpired during our relationship with David is what was discussed in the interview.
Okay, good. And also for the listeners out there, Michael Entertainment Group, or MEG, was founded in 2013. So, along with Michael O'Donnell, was the other. David Crowley referred to you as the Mikes, and so that was. So you're roughly a fairly new company at the time, because you were in talks with David in the time frame of, I believe it was May through September of 2014. So this was a 1-year-old company at the time. Is that correct?
Well, between Mike and myself, we've been in the industry for a long time, and we decided to partner up together and start our own company. So that's how that transpired. So it's not like, we are a new startup company at the time, but we were both in the industry for many, many, many years.
Oh, very good, very good. And then how did, and so that interview was good. You felt that was good. You haven't seen obviously the final product, but
not yet. No.
Okay. How did David Crowley and the Gray State Project come into communication? How did you guys connect? Did you reach out to him, or did he reach out to you fellas?
We have a mutual friend, and the mutual friend connected us together. So we set up a meeting with David in California. I talked to David numerous times on the telephone prior to our first meeting. So that's how we got together.
Oh, perfect. And then it got to a point where David flew out there along with Kamel and met with you guys in May of 2014. And Mike O'Donnell wrote in I think it was the Dystopia article from Alec Wilkinson that he said, quote, "It was a roadmap for the next American Revolution." And then your quote was, "This was our most promising project." Can you elaborate a little more on those two quotes?
Well, I can't speak for Mike O'Donnell, but I can speak for myself. It was a very promising project. David wrote the first go-around of the screenplay. We went through it thoroughly, made numerous changes, advised David to make numerous changes. And so it was a very promising project. At first we were taking it to the big screen, and then as we thought about it, we figured, how can we pack in all this information in a 2-hour or 2.5-hour film? Let's take it to television. Let's take it to network and have a series made out of it, which would have been, a lot better for the concept of the idea of David's idea. So it was very promising. We were talking about hiring some pretty substantial A-list actors to fulfill some of the roles in the project. So, with the whole concept of David's idea and the idea of the show, and we just figured it was going to be a great film, or even a series on TV.
Yeah, that's what he was mentioning. It could have been a web series or a television.
We weren't going to take it to web series. Web series that's kind of a different market.
Okay.
It depends on what you're considering web series, right? Netflix or something like that. Then we could take it to that. But web series normally is an 8 to 10 minute television show. That's it.
Yeah, there was another thing to clarify for some of those following the cases. In looking at the interview with that Mitch Heil came out with recently, and after he dropped off the project at the time, and he was more, and I think some of the other Gray State members were looking to get this movie done and focusing on a one-effort movie to focus on, whereas David Crowley was looking at this project more as a franchise, more of different outgrowths from it, and have it long-term deal with the documentary, the movie, the series, potentially. Everything. It was the whole thing, and I think that's what kind of turned off Mitch Heil at that point, because he was like, let's just do this one thing and let's get it done. And David wanted to have this thing with many legs and kind of a lot of going in a lot of directions, and I think people were kind of potentially, and I'm not putting words in the mouth, but put off by that, because was it it almost was like David couldn't focus on what he wanted to get done first. Did you get that, gist, I guess?
I never got that impression from David at all. He'd always, every time we talked, every time we set up meetings, he was always very focused and geared towards, getting the production of this film going or the television show going. Our ideas, Michael and myself, our ideas were, how do you pack the concept of this idea into a 2-hour film? I mean, it's virtually impossible. It would be so chopped up and so cut up. I mean, it could be done, obviously, right? They do it all the time in Hollywood. It could be done. However, we were looking at it from the long haul that, hey, you know what, this would be a great A&E show. It would be a great whatever, cable network television show that could eventually spin off into a film.
Correct. Okay.
David's ideas, he had so many different ideas and so many different angles that this thing could have lasted on cable network.
Very good. So he was very professional, very business professional, and very mature for his age. I mean, for a young guy coming out doing all of this, did you find him to be very mature, or a loose cannon that didn't have his head in the right spot, and like that?
We never saw David as a loose cannon. David was always very mature, very professional, very kind and courteous, and outgoing and excited. That's the key word for me with that question is excited. The amount of excitement with him was, with regards to the project, was phenomenal. I mean, how he was in his personal life, I have no idea, because we never got to that point, right?
Yeah.
I talked to David numerous times on the telephone in between our meetings over that period of time, and he was always very, very professional and like I said, very excited. When we sat down the first time after Mike and myself ran through the screenplay thoroughly, and gave him suggestions. Hey, for example, like the first go around of the screenplay was very centralized, and he had it centrally located, basically, if you will, in his territory, okay, in the Midwest. And we're like, well, no, because if this is the concept of what your movie or what the movie's going to be, then you got to be nationwide, right? You got to be coast to coast, north to south. So he went back to work in the studio and started, implementing some changes with regards to some of our suggestions and discussions that we had with him.
So this was, I've got here my notes say that was May of 2014 that you first met. And then in September, David said that he wrote for 31 straight hours and then mailed the new script to LA, so it would arrive on September 17th, the same day as Mike O'Donnell's birthday. And he also included a Gray State poster in with the package because, he spent a lot of time, like you said, with those suggestions, and then repackaging that and sending it out. And it alludes to me that he was very proud of this next package. He had his wife read through it, and they mailed it off. And how was that received from you and the other Mike?
I'm trying to remember that. Now, I know, like, for my birthday, he sent me same thing. He sent me some Gray State merchandise, and he sent me a poster, and he signed it. I actually have a studio at my house, and it's actually hanging on the wall in my studio at my home. I think he had a couple different versions of the screenplay. I know the last version that I got from him, he put it in a 3-ring binder with a cover and wrote a nice little note to me on the front page of it and thanking us. And I mean, I still have that screenplay as well. So there was a few versions out there, but the last one we got, again, we were talking to him, and that's when we changed gears and decided that, hey, maybe this should go to television, this should go to cable network, because there's so much information we can pack into this thing that it would be better because it would get a longer run. So, and David was excited about that.
Yeah. Now, are you familiar with the quote from Jordan Page that came out saying that David and Gray State was in the middle of a $30 million deal from a company in Hollywood? Is that partially true? Is that half true? Is that? Jordan Page was the musician in the.
Yeah, I know who Jordan is.
Okay, so he came out and said that, and he was criticized roundly for that. But I think a lot of people came back and says, you know what? I think he's got some of that right and partially right. He obviously wasn't lying, but it may have been just construed because his quote on Facebook said the film was about to start production with a $30 million budget from a major Hollywood studio. So I've got multiple questions on that, but could you talk to that a little bit first? This is kind of ties into my first question for you, that you were kind of a startup, one-year-old company. Was it your firm that he was talking to as far as a major Hollywood studio, or is that another company?
I can't speak for Dave. I mean, I can't speak for that. I don't know if he was in talks with anybody else or not. But I'm going to tell you, we were in talks. I mean, we were negotiating with David at the time. We were talking about budgets for the film. We were talking about getting into production. Like I said, we had a list of A-list actors that I'm not going to even mention in this interview.
Correct.
We had a list of A-list actors that were potential for the movie, and we talked about a $25 to $30 million budget. We could easily see the budget of this film being a $25 to $30 million budget. So, and at the time all this was going down, we were negotiating back and forth with David and his lawyer. So, you know, there were negotiations. We were actually trying to option the screenplay. And when we optioned the screenplay for a certain amount of time. I think we were going for 24 months, if I remember right. And within that 24 months, we had to get into production with the film.
Yep.
Otherwise, the option goes back to David. So that's what our negotiations were with David at the time.
Yeah, that was good. I think another quote that I saw on the internet, that someone did say that the project was, quote, greenlit, and they were working out the smaller details.
That's what we were doing. We were working out the smaller details.
Okay, so, and I got chastised pretty heavily on social media for saying that there was a deal, not a signed contract with signatures deal, but I'm an accountant by trade, and I've been in business my whole life, and so I think what it's safe to say is you probably had an agreement in principle and an oral agreement on a potential deal, but there was no contract that was signed, and I drew a lot of flack from that because, and I agree that there was no contract signed, but you guys were going down that path with an agreement of some sort, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
That's correct. As far as I know, we were the go-to guys for David. I mean, the discussions that we've had, within detail, the discussions we had, the conversations we had, the ideas that we had, and just from talking to David, like, I want you guys, but we were out looking for funding. We were doing all kinds of things as we were going through the whole contract process with David and his lawyer.
Yeah,
So,
and I agree that, okay, go ahead.
all that was being done simultaneously.
Yep, and I think that, and David's lawyer, by the way, was Adam Gislason, and he was no longer at the company that he's had. He had since switched. I have reached out to him to get another interview as far as talking with David's, state of mind and things like that. But that is correct. It was Gislason that was working with David in the Gray State. And the other question that I think that you can help clear up is when you're talking a $30 million budget, that is, to me, from a business standpoint, is how much a project would cost. People are taking that David signed a $30 million deal, therefore he was sitting on a check written to himself for $30 million, and he was rich. That is not and never would be the case. He would have gotten installment payments, correct, if this deal would have gone down to himself, or installments of some sort of a deal. But he was never at any time sitting on $25 to $30 million in his bank account ever, right?
Never.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's what. And when we talk about $25 to $30 million, that's what we budgeted for the film project. That's what we budgeted for everything to do from start to finish with the film project. So yeah, it was never, here, David, here's $25 or $30 million check. Let's get moving on the project. That's never the case.
Yeah, and that's important point to point out. I think that's an important point because the film, if it made the gone out to the big screens, could have grossed 60, 70, 80, 90 million, but the cost or the expense of making and producing the film was what your number of 25 to 30 was really at, and that was the expense to hire and produce and to get the actors and actually, make. That would have been out of pocket expenses for the company. Okay, very good. Very good. Well, that really helps clear the air on some of that because at the same time there was concern that David was depressed, didn't have money, bankrupt, and at the same time people were talking that know that he was rich, but he did spend many years making this, and he didn't have a full-time job per se. So those statements are also correct to some extent, and now, I think you're correct that he wasn't working with any other companies. I think that he was focused on you guys and taking the changes and the suggestions that you offered to write his subsequent, it sounds like there was potentially up to 6 different versions of the script. So I think it's safe to say he wasn't working with anyone else, but that's just my opinion.
I agree with that. I agree with that. With the conversations we had, and he never let on to work with anybody else. It doesn't mean he wasn't talking to anybody else. Just from my opinion and my thoughts here, that it's just like we were the go-to guys.
Yeah, and then on September 26th, David receives a response from Michael Entertainment Group saying that his script would be better suited for a TV series, and this was after it looks like Mike O'Donnell ran the cost of the project. And that's where he came up and said basically it's better suited for a TV series. And that's the last we really hear from communication from you three folks. And people think, or there's conjecture that this got David down, this got David depressed, and ultimately in the time frame where he started isolating himself and his family. How do you think that his response was to that TV series?
Well, we actually met face to face in Hollywood, sat down. I don't remember the name of the establishment we were at, but it was right on Sunset Boulevard. Sometime in that time frame with David. David was out in California, flew out for the night just to come sit down with us and discuss the updates on the screenplay and discuss concept and everything else. And that's when we sat down and he actually made a new trailer. We're sitting in there watching the trailer. And then we discussed, hey, let's think about taking this to television. And we gave the reasons why. It's, you get picked up by a network, and it was just off the heels of Sons of Anarchy leaving the network.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And so we figured this could be a good spin-off for the network that Sons of Anarchy was on. And it would pick up the demographics of Sons of Anarchy. So, we talked to him about numbers and statistics and discuss, if we take this to series, then not only do you have a series, it can play out longer, then at the end of the series, you can go to big screen. And he was excited about it. He was open-minded about it and thought it was a great idea. So to sit there and say that, with the message from O'Donnell that we're going to take this to network, depression didn't play in one bit to that, as far as I know, because he was, like I said, when we discussed it, he was excited about it. He thought it was a great idea. And if we could follow through with that, then let's, and discuss it, and it's the right move, then we could go that route. So I don't know where the whole depression comes into play when it comes to regards to taking Gray State Network.
Yeah, I think that was, and that line, that narrative, I think, was injected into the story to help sell the official narrative that he was down and depressed when he was actually excited for this entire project, because at the same time he was working on his documentary called Gray State: The Rise, and he was going to release that on YouTube actually for free around Christmas time or the end of the year there in 2014, which was basically he was putting the final finishing touches on that. Now, were you involved at all with the Gray State: The Rise, or did he mention and talk to you guys about that piece, or is that just an individual project that he was working on the side?
Yeah, we weren't involved with that at all. We knew he was doing it, he was talking about doing it, but we had no involvement with that whatsoever.
And so releasing a documentary like that, 2.5 hour documentary called The Rise, he was going to give it away essentially for free on YouTube just to get the message out, inform people, educate the public. And that kind of flies in the face of folks saying that David was doing all this for the money. He was out for the money. He was out to get rich. He was trying to make a boatload of money on all these projects. And that was not David's personality. Can you talk to that a little bit? He knew he was going to make some money on this, but he was not out there. He was more to get the message out and his script. Is that correct, or was he a gold digger per se in Hollywood, trying to hoping you guys would bite on this story so he could become a millionaire?
Well, I can't speak for what his thought process is, but I can tell you from my run-ins with David, money is always a factor. I don't care what you do in business, money's a factor, right? David's an artist. David was an artist through and through, period, okay? He had an artist mindset, and he had a belief in what he was doing, okay? And he did it for the love of what he was doing. However, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about money. And we discussed money with David. I don't remember the parameters of what we discussed, but we discussed money with David. And David's from my recollection, David's first love was the art that he was performing. Okay? But there was always money as a factor. I mean, everybody's in business to make money. I'm not in business to give stuff away for free and, at the end of the day be, who I am. I mean, it's a matter of there's always a money factor. Now with our deal with David, I'm not going to discuss figures or anything like that, but our deal with David, we put out an offer to David to option the contract, which would have gave him some money up front, and then we would have went and ran with the film project or the television project. David would have been a producer on the film, so he would have been getting paid to be a producer on the film, and then he would have reaped some of the benefits of whatever the film grossed. We all would have. So that was the factor here, and it wasn't like David was a money-hungry grabbing guy, and he was trying to weasel his way into Hollywood. David had an idea, and it was a very, very, very strong idea, and so that's why we all got together. But again, he did it for the love of the art, but also knowing that, hey, this could be a payday.
Correct. Oh, very good. That's all good information. Trying to get the listeners to this, kind of get their head around David's personality and his mentality, because of a lot of that, in your talk right there, your description ties in with everyone that I've talked to. It aligns in with his personality. I never met David myself, never even spoke to him, so I started following this case after the bodies were found, but that's very much in alignment with what I've been hearing. The other concept that I'd like to square away with you guys from Michael Entertainment Group is there was conjecture that David, either the talks broke down and you guys cut him off, or David left, or David, quote, walked away, and the agreements just didn't work out. So it ultimately got down to there's two types of people out there following this case. They fall into two camps. One believed that Michael Entertainment Group essentially fired David or broke off the talks and says, screw you, get lost. Or David said, I know I got the offer, I'm all set to make big bucks. You know what, it's not for me because I want to run I do not want to be just a producer. I want to be the director on the film, and I don't want anything changed. I don't want anything altered with this script. Therefore, see you later. I'm going to move and part ways. Those are the two camps that we're dealing with, and if you could talk to that a little bit as far as what you think was more of the truth.
Neither one of them. Neither one of those even came into play when we were in discussions with David. And David knew he wasn't going to be the director. We discussed that early on with David because he wasn't a known director. So if we were going to go into this film with a $25 to $30 million budget, David couldn't be the director. We would have needed a top name director in the industry, which has clout. Okay, so and David knew that from day one, and David was fine with that. David was going to be actually an AD. We were going to make David the assistant to the director, and that's what we discussed with David. So we didn't fire David, or we didn't get rid of David, or however that went, and he didn't walk away from us. I mean, there was never any of that, and I don't even know where those two ideas came from.
Yeah, I think there was
At least to my knowledge. At least to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we didn't tell. We never told David to get lost.
Yeah, and I think
tried contacting David after our September meeting or discussion. I tried contacting David for months to discuss things with nothing. I mean, I didn't hear from him or anything, and so I was getting a little nervous myself. Not nervous for our business transaction, but just nervous because I couldn't. I mean, listen, David and I became friends. Not only were we business acquaintances, but we became friends. So, you know, I mean, I called him on the holidays and wished him a happy Thanksgiving to him and the family, and you know, whatever. I mean, I did that numerous times until I heard the very, very disturbing news. You know, so.
Now, how was your how did you receive the news of this, and how did you process that after working so close and becoming friends with David?
I was in total shock. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it.
And then,
I actually so Christmas comes, December 14, I guess it is, comes around. I called David on around Christmas time to wish him and Camilla and the baby happy holidays. I went out of town for New Year's. When I got back, I called him to wish him a happy New Year. And then I still didn't hear anything, so I felt it was kind of weird. So I contacted a mutual friend that David and I both had and asked this person, like, let me take a step backwards. Prior to that, I called this person saying, man, I haven't heard from David in like at least a month. Have you heard from him? He's like, no, but it's the holidays. You guys got him in the studio writing. He's been, when he gets into that writing mode, he shuts down and he secludes himself and he just focuses on what he has to do. He goes, but as the holidays are coming up, I'll run by and see him and see the family and see how things are going. And I'm like, all right, cool. So like another month goes by, and then after New Year's, after I left David a Happy New Year message on this voicemail, I called this person and said, man, I still haven't heard from David. Did you go over to the holidays? He's like, no. And then like the next day, the guy calls me and says, did you hear? And when he told me, I was in total shock.
wow, because and you also knew Comel. She was out there for one or two of the visits also, and took a picture of you guys standing together. What was your thoughts on Comel?
I thought she was amazing. Her and I have a lot in common. She was a nutritionist, and I'm very heavily into nutrition and paleo and all that other stuff. And so her and I hit it off very, very well because we have the same interests. Right?
Okay.
So
okay.
yeah, I mean, we had many great conversations about the whole paleo diet and nutrition and eating healthy and all that other stuff. So I mean, we always had great conversations about that.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Was there any truth to David and Comel looking to buy a home or rent an apartment in L.A.? And if so, how close were they to doing it? Did they have a real estate agent or anything, or were you aware of that at all?
No, I was not aware of that at all.
Okay.
I had no idea.
Okay. That came up in some discussions, and I thought you might be aware of that. And then, just in our last few minutes here, what was your thought when you found out that David's mother, Kate, died unexpectedly in August?
I didn't even know about that either at the time. I didn't know about that either.
Okay.
So, David never made mention of that. I mean, obviously, if I would have known that, we would have done something, sent flowers or something, but I had no idea about that.
Oh, well, no, she died after the bodies were found.
Oh, not prior.
No.
Okay. Yeah, you know what, I honestly don't remember.
Okay. It was about 8 months later, and she was, according to police reports, really the only person close in the family that questioned the narrative of this going down that way. So people, including myself, thought it strange that she mysteriously died. We never did get an answer as to how she died. She was young, healthy, worked 2 jobs, and then just mysteriously died on her back patio one night. And so they found her body. So I don't want to get into the conspiracy side of that, but I find that very strange. But that was news to you then as well.
Yeah, that's news to me. You know what? I didn't even hear about it. Not that I can remember.
Now, at the end of, it looks like my last question here is more legal related with Adam Gislason, and you might be able to have some comment on this, being in the business. Now, David went to his main character star in the program, as Danny August Mason was his main actor, and wanted to get him out of the program, out of the copyright, out of any rights in the film, and so went to his lawyer Gislason to send Danny in an email, an attachment that just says, here you go, here's a form to sign to release your rights to this film. We're moving forward without you. And Danny never responded back to that. And then in December, around the 7th, David Crowley wrote back to Danny August Mason and says, what's the status on that? Have you signed that away? Because I need to move forward. And, we need to, essentially, for this project, cut ties. Danny August Mason said that, I need to run it by my lawyer before I sign anything, and I'll get back to you. And he never really did. So it was clear that we've got evidence that David wanted Danny out of the project. He never responded back. Is that a common thing with as far as signing away your rights? Because if David would have become wealthy and made this project, Danny would have been sitting on the sidelines with absolutely nothing. Is that a common thing, or how would someone take that if you were served with a paper like that, essentially, with your essentially one of your friends working on it?
I have no idea what David and Danny's deals were. I can't answer to that. And we had nothing behind that. We didn't have anything to do with that whatsoever. We didn't invite David to do that, so I don't even know why. I know that was brought up when we were doing our interview with Eric Nelson, but other than that, I have no idea why David did that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So,
yeah, he was on the verge around the. It seems like the September-October time frame is when he was doing some house cleaning with the guys on his project. And I don't know if you knew any of the fellas there, and I'm not going to ask you that, but he was cleaning house because he wanted to put together a new, quote, trustworthy team, and he was pulling away from everyone in his group, and I think that got spun into the media narrative that he was distancing himself and going into a deep depression and isolating himself, but really he was cutting ties with those closest to him because he didn't find them trustworthy, and I think that's what kind of leads into this whole when you get into the motive of the potential murders. He's sitting on this script. Whether David was alive or not, that script could have been budgeted for 25-30 million, and that was the value of it. That was the potential value of the script, whether David was involved with it or not. And if he was wiped out, knocked out of the way, someone else took it over, they would have been able to reap the benefits of this project. And so that's kind of the thinking that those of us have as far as a motive for this. And the only people I'm getting hit with hard as people against that theory is the people in the gray state. They're saying there was no deal, there was no value, the script was worthless, David wasn't working with anybody. And, so it comes into that whole means, motive, and opportunity that many think that it's actually the gray state members themselves had the potential greatest thing to gain if David was out of the picture. If the body was found and someone else came and presented you with the script, would it still be viable? Will it still be the same asset value, or was David the linchpin holding it all together?
well, when all this transpired, we backed away. We backed away because of all the conspiracy theories and everything else. We just, for a long time, for at least over a year, we didn't even discuss it. We just figured it was too toxic to even be involved with. So whoever got involved, I know since then they've made something. I know there were a couple guys out there that contacted me saying, hey man, we made this thing, we want you to see it, what's your thoughts? And we've never even got involved. Then we had a conversation at least a year, if not a little longer than a year after David's death, with David's dad, and I think it was Danny Mason. I think it was. I can't remember for sure, but we had a conversation with them about picking this thing back up and running with it, because as far as I remember, David's dad got the rights to the film, or got the rights to David's estate. So
yeah.
he wanted to do
Yeah, and it seems like I would bet that the other person would have been Danny August Mason, because 4 months after the bodies were found, Danny was already in process of getting the Gray State name trademarked with an attorney to get the the name and a phrase Gray State trademarked already. So he was moving forward with the project. So it must have been him, as was what would be my guess.
Yeah, it must have been.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got to let you go here, Mike. I thank you for your time, but do you have any other closing thoughts to wrap this up, to help clear the air, if there's anything out there that you can think of?
Not that I can think of. I mean, again, I'll reiterate myself, but we always had a pleasant experience with David. We never saw any downside to David whatsoever. Very, very motivated young man. It was actually a pleasure working with David. He took all of our ideas and all of our thoughts and took them to heart, and never balked about it whatsoever to us. So, I mean, if he did something on his own time or, around someone else, we were never privy to it whatsoever. So.
Excellent. All right. Thanks. That makes sense. All right, Mike, thanks for your time. I think it's very helpful information. I'll get this out so people can make their own conclusions from it, but at least have some basis from someone in the know, someone who worked closely with him in his last final months, and I think it's very, very helpful. So I can't say enough. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Have a good day.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Yep. Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is October 10th, 2018, and I'm be providing an update for the Crowley case updates. Tonight's episode, the case of the missing will. Catherine Kate Crowley, born 1964, died in 2015. Kate Crowley was David Crowley's mother, was Camille Crowley's mother-in-law, and Rannie Crowley's grandmother. So David and his sister Allison and his brother Dan Jr. Grew up with their mom Kate and their dad Dan Sr. They got divorced in the year 2000 and I believe it was 2005. Here's the Kate's obituary that was posted after she died. She was healthy, had 2 jobs, and was in good condition. They say that she simply died. There was no real explanation to it. And to the left here is a family photo taken in August 2014 at Rannie's birthday party there at the Crowley residence. And so that's 1 year. 1 year later is when she was found dead in her home, unresponsive in her backyard. For those who don't recall, we have a lot of new members in the group. For those who don't recall, Kate Crowley lived in Owatonna, Minnesota. Her ex-husband Dan Sr. also lived in that same city, and that is about, I think, about a 35 to 40 minute drive away from Apple Valley, where the Crowley residence was, where the 3 bodies were found dead. And so that was January of 2015. Now, this is only less than 7 months later. The police report here in the local paper for Owatonna stated on August 9th, a death investigation for police. At midnight, officers responded to a death investigation report on Lancer Lane Northeast. So this is right at midnight. Officers responded. On the 9th, she was found unresponsive and already dead, slumped over a chair, sitting in a chair next to a table on this back patio. And so she died on August 8th that evening. A welfare check was done, I believe, by her boyfriend, who hadn't received any phone calls earlier that night, hadn't heard from her. he did a welfare check, showed up, and then saw the body, called police. So this was after the midnight hour of August 9th and the early morning hours of August 9th, 2015. So we've got David Comel Raniel dead, bodies found January of 2015. The police reports come out, and the significance of this case is that the police reports came out and everyone bought into and went along with the official story that David killed his wife, his 6-year-old or 5-year-old daughter, and then himself in a after being despondent and in a case of depression and whatnot, and then he did all this. Now the police reports, the only mention of the 94-page police reports of anyone doubting the story was David's mother, Kate. She's the only one who said, "I didn't believe this could happen this way unless they were either both in on it or they had some kind of an agreement or something, but this is not something David would do." That's why there's been so much scrutiny on the strange, suspicious death of Kate Crowley. And so we'll be getting into that more here. So there's the back patio of her home where the body was found in Owatonna, Minnesota. In looking into the estate and what would happen to the estate, there was questions and concerns as far as the benefit, the motive, if this was not just an accidental death, who would have been behind it. And so in looking for this, we see the court documents for the estate of Catherine Crowley, deceased. We see the petitioner as Daniel J. Crowley. That is the David's brother, DJ. This is Daniel J. And so he was the one who filed the paperwork to get the ball rolling on the estate. He used an attorney named Gregory C. Olson that he retained for this. And what we see on August 19th of 2015, the highlighted in the yellow, is a statement of content, either lost, destroyed, or unavailable will, document ID number 4. And that kind of perked up our interest there as far as the will. Being only 51 years old, folks were wondering if she had a will. If she did, if she didn't, did she have money? Was there any sort of reason to have her, anyone to have her dead? And so when we saw this was fairly interesting as far as the will destroyed or unavailable or lost. And what we get here now, just this week, an individual, a citizen investigator, found this information and provided it to me here, the following. The first thing is here, these document to the above named court, the undersigned Allison Crowley respectfully states she's the daughter, a surviving daughter. So Kate has died, and she was divorced, not remarried, and so the only remaining members left of the family is her son DJ and her daughter Allison. Allison here in this paperwork, she's living in Chicago at the time. She's basically, if you look at number 4 there, she renounces any right to the appointment as to the personal representative and hereby nominates her brother Daniel J. as the personal representative of the above named estate. So really she's signing away her rights here on August 14th to say that, you know what, I want my brother to be in charge. I want my brother to take over this. And that was on the 14th. So this explains, if we go back here a page, why Daniel Crowley is the one doing the petitioning. That question was raised. Why was he first to inquire about her estate? But it really wasn't. It was Allison did the paperwork, signing it over to Daniel J. So Dan Jr. now, on the 19th, goes and begins his course of business, prepping the estate here for his late mother. So she signed it away. We've got this. The next form here is paperwork also filed on August 19th in the 3rd District Court. So if you look at the top right, in the middle right, all uppercase, it says Statement of Contents of Lost or Otherwise Unavailable Will for a deceased person. And so it says here, the undersigned states to the above named court that the original last will and testament of the above named decedent is unavailable because it is lost, and that the will contained the following. The residue of the estate as follows: to my spouse, number 1, if my spouse survives me. Now, Kate's not married. She's divorced in 2005. Number 2 is, if my spouse does not survive me, then I devise and said residue to be divided into equal shares and distributed to my children. And so they couldn't find the will. They looked for it and couldn't find the will, but whoever it was that went basically says, we don't have it, but here's what it stated. And so take that how you wish, but whatever she had the final funds going into, it says now it's going to be divided to the equal shares. So really, Allison and Dan Jr. would get all the remaining assets. She did not have lots of money. She was not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. She did have debts and bills to pay, but there still was excess carryover that was left, and that was then divvied up between Allison and Dan Jr. And if you read here on this next page, it's very interesting. There's 4 things. I want to cover the first 3 items. Number 1, Daniel T. Crowley. This is the former spouse of the decedent. It says here on number 1 that he went through the decedent's legal documents and records after her death and was unable to locate the original of the will after conducting a thorough and exhaustive search. So it looks like he was able to go into her records and her personal belongings to look for it, and says that he was unable to locate it, a hard copy of the will. Number 2, they contacted the attorney's office responsible for the drafting of the will. The will was prepared at the office of Gregory C. Olson of Patton, Hoverston, and Berg, PA, who verified that the original will was not contained in the client's file, which was on record there. So let's reiterate here, item number 2, they couldn't find the original will, which means that at one point Kate Crowley had a will. She went so far as to have an attorney, Gregory Olson here, who was also representing Dan Jr. in the estate. She at one point must have gone to him to have a will prepared. And so now the ex-husband couldn't find it, the lawyer couldn't find it. And then number 3, inquiries were made within the family as to whether or not anyone had knowledge of a new will being executed, since the old will dated March 13th, 2006. And it says here, a thorough and exhaustive search was made for the will shortly after the death, and there was no information as to any such will being found. So let's go back. They were divorced in 2005. Kate Crowley had a will done with the help of Gregory C. Olson on March 13th of 2006. So right away, a young divorced mother of 3 goes and gets a will done at an attorney's office at Patton, Hoverston, and Berg. Now the will goes missing in between time, so they don't know if there was an updated will, a new version, anything of the sort, but a thorough and exhaustive search of the home, item number 1, couldn't be found. Item number 2, at the law office, they couldn't be found. And number 3, the remaining people of the family, the remaining family members, could not or did not know or was even aware of a will. So this gets to the title of the broadcast, The Mystery, the Case of the Missing Will. We had been under the assumption here, looking into the investigation of the Crowley case and subsequently the Kate Crowley case, that we didn't think there was a will. We just thought that she died, she was young, and nothing came of it. It did perk up our ears as there was a strange, the secretness of the death, as far as family members even found out of Kate's passing on our Facebook page for the Crowley case, because it was very secretive the way that was handled and that information was disseminated. And so now we find out that there was indeed a will, in fact, way back in 2006. Now the strange thing for me here is that not only could they find the will, the hard copy will, but they went to the attorney's office and could not find the will. So hopefully on this video here in the comments section below, those of you who are attorneys and whatnot, feel free to make a comment. Is that common? Or aren't they required to keep the copy of the will of their clients on site? So let's try to clarify that. So anyway, Gregory Olson could not find it. The last page of this information here that was forwarded to me by a citizen investigator was this state of Minnesota, Steele County, which is Owatonna, is Daniel J. Crowley declaring, states under oath that the representation in the foregoing statement is true as far as he knows, and that such a statement is true and complete to the best of his knowledge. He's signed off. In fact, it's notary, a notary signature, then a stamp besides, and at the very bottom you see it's Gregory Olson, Patton, Halberstam, and Berg. So he signs off. It's good to go. This is August 19th of 2015. She dies the 8th. They find the body on the 9th. And here we go, 19 days later. Everything's kind of gone through, and in 10 days they can't come up with anything. And so they give the remaining assets to equally between Allison and Dan Jr. So I began to look into the background of this Gregory Olson. His name has come up a couple of times here. He does work here, it looks like, for Patton, Halberstam, and Berg, PA. This is the website. It does show the profiles of their lawyers and their attorneys on staff. And they've got several locations. And here is Mr. Gregory Olson. So he's handling, he was, I guess, a family lawyer on the Kate Crowley side, and then did the will. And then when Dan Jr. went to go get the claim with Allison as well, they also worked with Gregory Olson. So they went to the offices of Patton, Halberstam, and Berg. Now, if I go to LinkedIn and pull up Patterson, Halberstam, and Berg, I see that there's 17 employees on LinkedIn. So small, rather small office, some paralegals, some attorneys, and I don't see Mr. Greg Olson's name there mentioned. And so there is a page 2. Here's the second list of employees there at the firm on LinkedIn. I don't see a Gregory Olson there at all. Now, if I go and do an actual search on LinkedIn for Gregory Olson, his name does come up as just Greg Olson. It looks like he's not linked to his actual employer for Patton and for the full name, but he's got listed here just PH&B Law Offices. I find it strange he only has 3 connections. Not connected to the firm, only 3 connections. Usually attorneys have very well connected with what it is they're doing. So go back to the page, and certainly enough, even though he's not listed there on LinkedIn, he certainly is a member. There's his picture again with the rest of the team. So Gregory C. Olson does in fact work there. Just may not be too involved in LinkedIn to keep his information up to speed, but that is something different. All right, his background and his profile shows his various bar admissions and his certifications. He's been around for a while here, first getting admitted to the bar in 1978, so he's been around for a while and has been an attorney lawyer for many years. That also could explain the LinkedIn, the lack of information on the LinkedIn site, as many younger folks keep that page up to date. Older folks do not have that much interest in that, so that could explain that. His education was University of Minnesota, Bachelor of Arts in 73, then got a master's degree in 81, and then got his law degree from Hamlin in 1977. So he's been around for a while. Now, what I was interested in here for, thinking of how someone could lose the will here, I wanted to see what his background was. Where did Mr. Greg Olson work in the past? It shows currently that he's an attorney at Patton, and we see that. That is correct. That makes sense. He's been there since 2007. And then attorney, law offices of Gregory C. Olson from 78 to 2007. So for many years, looks like he ran his own law firm, his single practice there by himself, right after getting his degree. So it doesn't appear that he worked anywhere. Got his degree and started his own law practice, and then listed as an adjunct professor at the University of St. Thomas since 1984 to present. That's pretty good university here in the Twin Cities area. So I began to do some research looking up here with the Secretary of State, Office of Minnesota Secretary of State. I couldn't find any business record searches for law offices of Gregory Olson. I did a search for active statuses, inactive statuses, and it contains the name Gregory C. Olson or the phrase law offices of Gregory C. Olson. And as you see there at the bottom, no results match. So he may have just been running his own business and never filed or never set it up or never registered his business. So I thought, well, let's go to the St. Thomas website. And St. Thomas here, University of St. Thomas, here's the actual website of their adjunct faculty. So you can go right there to the website, and anyone can scroll down the list of adjunct professors that they've got and can see how many people are currently on staff. It's listed in alphabetical order. Let me click this here, try to scroll down. There we go. A lot of adjunct professors listed alphabetical at the University of St. Thomas. Many. Listed from A all the way through last name Will. I don't see a Gregory Olson listed at all. He's been there since 1984, adjunct professor, so that's about 34 years at the university. And so here it is, alphabetical. Let's go to the letter O. I see a Brett Olander. I don't see a Greg Olson at all. Gregory Olson. So maybe they just forgot to list his name on their website. Pretty prestigious school there. Looks like they've got all these up to date. Can't imagine they would have forgot about Mr. Greg Olson, but perhaps they did. But he's been there for 34 years. Now the other thing is that profile may not be updated with his current employer, so maybe he no longer is an adjunct professor. And I had thought about that as well. I did a Google search relating to St. Thomas University, the phrase adjunct professor and the name Gregory C. Olson on Google, and in fact nothing came up. Nothing came up at all, as if he ever worked there or was ever an adjunct professor at all. So I'm beginning to question Mr. Olson's background. And so I've got a premium account here at the White Pages. Looked him up, looked up his background. A couple things came up that were strange. Not out of the ordinary, but I just consider them strange. I've got a speeding ticket here, 65 and a 55 by Mr. Gregory Olson. That was just this January, it looks like. And then we go to the next page. We've got a charge 1 of a DWI back in 97. Charge 2 of a second DWI. This was less than a year later, his second one. And if you look at the highlighted mention there, September 1st of 98, pulled over by the Minnesota State Patrol in Rochester with a .20 gross misdemeanor. And I'm assuming on that first case, he would have been under a 1 or 2 year probation after the first DWI. So this would have been a violation of his with the second DWI, and that's why they listed it up here as a gross misdemeanor. The first one looks like, if you look under the disposition, it says dismissed. DWI dismissed back in 97, then one within the year that's convicted, they jack it up to a gross misdemeanor. And that that's two within a 5-year period. And then charge number 3 is a failure to display ATV registration tags. That looks to be probably a 4-wheeler or some kind of all-terrain vehicle. So some trouble with the law, not big, and that took place in the year 2000. And last of all, we see here on that same background report a bankruptcy charge for Mr. Gregory Olson. So it looks like in 2012, Greg Olson filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy charges. And so, strange goings-ons here with this case, and once again, whether it's the Crowley case from Apple Valley, the triple murder case that we've been looking into, or the Kate Crowley strange, suspicious, mysterious death. Now we find out that she did in fact have a will, and that will was done at an attorney's office, saved and signed, and now it's surprisingly went missing. And so it's just one more strange, odd, coincidental thing relating to this case. Once again, please leave your comments below here with any suggestions you have, or if you were an attorney or with an attorney background, clarify some of this stuff for the rest of us here. Thanks for listening. Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is November 24th, 2018, and I'll be providing updates on the Crowley case updates. Tonight's episode will be called The Curious Case of Danny August Mason. Some interesting things have come to light here this last week, documents that have been shared with the group, and I'm going to put this into a summary format that'll be easier to digest for the viewers. Now, one of the main contentions early on with this case, along with David Crowley and the project called the Gray State, was whether or not there was a contract, whether or not there was a movie deal, whether or not there was a binding contract for this movie to move forward. And so we'll address some of that tonight. It appears that was the answer to that question was really, it's a gray area of what it really was. But I'll go through that tonight in certain sequences here. Let's get started. What we do have is that there was a proposal, there was a deal between Gray State, the Gray State Project, and MEG, which is Michael Entertainment Group. And this talks about the deal with the motion picture rights concerning an option, purchase agreement, deal, memo. And so what we have here is a document given to us in PDF format that was really made or agreed on July 25th of the year 2014. So we know David Crowley went to Hollywood, I believe once in May and once in June, and now we get to July, and there's a deal in place. I had a previous interview with Mike Boggio III. He is the president of Michael Entertainment Group, or MEG as it's referred to here. He did say that they were under a deal. They did have they were working toward this production of a feature film or even a web series with Gray State. So we know a deal was in place. So let's go through this contract here. It talks about the option. It talks about the various rights. And let's go to the second page. I'm not going to get into the details. You can certainly pause this video and read it for yourself. But it talks about the various rights, the publishing rights, various bonuses, consulting fees, travel expenses, and so on. And then here's the final piece of it. Basically, the contract here is between MEG, M-E-G, and David Crowley for Gray State. Now, this contract, just to clarify, this copy that we received was not signed. So we know that a contract was proposed, or a proposed deal here was on the books. The contention that we had was that we don't have any proof that anything was ever signed, and this also leads us to believe that still doesn't answer that question. Nothing here says anything was signed. This was just a file of the proposal. So we know David was working on a deal, Meg was working on a deal. Whether or not it was a signed contract or not is another deal. Now, since this contract, we also do have evidence that came to light from David Crowley in PDF format once again, showing the invoice from a law firm called Lohman Abdul, Minneapolis-based law firm. And so we see an invoice here at the end of July, which also makes sense. July 31st was the bill. We see the previous deal was, let's go back to the date, July 25th is when they basically agreed on the deal. Now we get an invoice from the lawyers, David Crowley's lawyers, working on the deal. And let's go to page 2 of the invoice. Line by line itemization talking about the dates of work being done from July 9th, 10th, 12th, 15th, various number of hours and what was being done and by who. And page 3 of the invoice, dates showing here July 18th all the way down to July 30th. Now if you look at July 25th, there's 3 entries there towards the bottom talking about revising and finalizing the draft between Gray State and MEG, the deal memorandum, teleconference, and the final draft. And so it's fair to say that David had a legal team, legal attorneys working on this deal. There was a deal, and legal team was involved, so sure enough, there was something in place. We don't know exactly what, but we've got evidence here to support that David Crowley was moving forward with some project. Now, the other piece of the puzzle, David had several companies he was working with, and several companies in the state of Minnesota that he owned. And so one of them, he had to get the release documents of the other individuals that he had business relationships with. This one here is a release agreement between David Crowley and Danny August Mason. Now, this is page 1, basically just releasing his rights. This was a legal document in PDF format that requests Danny August Mason to relinquish his rights and release his contractual obligations to the Gray State project. And there's page 1, and here is page 2. And so we see that the location here for the date and signature between David Crowley and Danny Mason. Now the effective date is quite interesting here, and it's important. The date here, effective date towards the bottom, mentions August 1st, 2014. So his legal team writes up a release document as of August 1st to release Danny August Mason from any projects, because we know on July 25th, David has an agreement of some sort moving forward with MEG, and in fact, Lohman Abdul was performing the legal work on that. The second one here is a release and waiver form also, and this relates to, if you look at the bottom, his business associate, Mitch Heil. And Mitch was involved in Hot Hat Productions, Gray State LLC, and in highlighted there is a company called the Bullet Exchange. And so it looks like 2 release forms were sent out by David Crowley, asking these 2 individuals to sign their paperwork, signature, date, send it back, and they can turn it back to the lawyers, and they would have their rights relinquished here. Now we know Mitch Heil relinquished his rights and sent it back. This copy does not show him his signature or date on this, but we know that they did finish this off sometime in the month of August, close the books, because there's the evidence of the garage sale David Crowley had at his Ramsdale Drive address in Apple Valley, selling off the excess equipment from the Bullet Exchange. So he had the garage sale and consolidated, or closed out of that business and shut down the Bullet Exchange. And then by releasing the rights here for Mitch Heil on Hot Hat Productions and Gray State, left only David Crowley to be in charge of Hot Hat Productions as the sole ownership of that. And then it was David Crowley for Gray State and Danny August Mason for Gray State LLC were the only 2 left. So Mitch Heil signed off. He did it to save the friendship and shut the business down, and to save the relationship. He'd known him from high school. So what we get next is a response from Danny August Mason back to David Crowley. Nothing happens in August. The effective date was August 1st to send this back. Nothing happened in August. Now we get to the end, toward the end of September, and there's a PDF file here that Danny August Mason writes to David Crowley. It's a little small here, but I'll blow this up. First, Danny says, I understand the agreement refers to Gray State LLC, and he talks about the difference is between Gray State, the Rise LLC. And he was not aware of this other business, and he wanted to clarify that as far as getting an understanding of what this release form relates to. Now, the release form relates to Gray State LLC. Gray State, this is where some of the other confusion comes in here, and I know we've got a lot of members on the page and in the group, is the Gray State, the Rise, was a separate entity, a separate organization, a company. They actually formed a company for the documentary. Gray State, the Rise, the documentary. Gray State here, just referred to as Gray State LLC, or Limited Liability Corporation, was the feature film, the full-length fiction-based feature film that was supposed to be made, produced, and shown on the big screen, or perhaps in a web series. This was the one that the contract is for, is Gray State only. And so the first bone of contention here between Danny August Mason is clarifying which company. The second paragraph, before I can sign any sort of release concerning Gray State, I request in exchange that you sign documentation allowing me, quote, complete access and control to Gray State, the Rise LLC. You have stated many times before this project is of no interest to you. I would like to continue to work on this project with Robert Hoyt and produce a finished project for our fans. I request that you sign over ownership of the LLC and sign a similar waiver and release of claims that you are now requesting of me. So this is very interesting. This is almost a demand, or you could call this in legalese a counter offer from the first request that's being sent. A counter offer. Now he's also, he's asking for the Rise, which is the documentary. That David was working on toward the end. Now the very last paragraph says, I cannot sign the agreement, as in for a handful of reasons, but most importantly because I have dedicated 4 years to Gray State. I have been intimately involved in the creating, casting, development, production, and marketing of the project to this point. I invested my time and energy, often at the expense of my job and financial security, with the understanding that eventually I would receive compensation. Though I have received nominal compensation, I believe that I'm rightfully entitled to 10% of the gross revenue of whatever may be generated from Gray State moving forward. I would request that documentation be executed prior to me releasing any other claims or rights I have. And so this was back on that September 26th response memo from Danny August Mason to David Crowley. So the first, when we're talking numbers about this Gray State movie or feature film, it has come up before that part of the plan was that it would potentially be a $30 million budget film. And so this is the value of everything in the project. This is the mother lode. The Gray State project, the Gray State movie, the feature film, has a value, an asset value of one could argue $30 million. And Danny August Mason is not going to sign this away too quickly, knowing he's put in 4 years and has been very dedicated to this project. He's pointing it out here that I'd like to have at least 10% of whatever gets done with it. And so he's basically saying, I cannot sign the agreement. And so that was another question. We wondered if Danny August Mason ever signed it, ever sent it over, ever forwarded it back to the attorneys, or did he never sign the document? So I believe here that he never signed it. As it says, clearly states here that I cannot sign the agreement. Now, if we look at the timeline, there's an email correspondence back and forth between Danny August Mason and David Crowley, going back to September 29th, and then a response on, I have it highlighted, December 9th, and then the final correspondence on December 16th of 2014. Remember, the bodies, according to police, they think the bodies were, all three were found deceased on December 20, were probably December 25th or 26th. The bodies were found by neighbors on January 17th of 2015. But now this is coming up to the week before, and they still haven't had this resolved. So I'm going to go through each of these responses here in timeline format. And so the very first one was on September 29th. Danny August Mason wrote, David, I apologize. I apologize for not getting this to you this weekend. Was busier than anticipated. Now this makes sense. His memo, his response memo, was dated December 26th, which was a Thursday. Danny Mason was obviously busy on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday he gets to sending this out in the form of an attachment, his response. Now this is the end of September, so I think David was hoping all this would be wrapped up in August, like it was with Mitch Heil. And now we get to the end of September. Still nothing. On December 9th, David writes to Danny saying, in deference to your hesitation to sign the Gray State release document, I give you these verbal guarantees. You will have A, full producer credit on the film The Rise, an unpaid position. And that is The Rise. Once again, this is the documentary, which he wanted to move forward with anyway. And B, letter B, was guaranteed casting as lead role in Gray State series, paid. So he's saying this not in legal, but basically giving his word. A verbal guarantee is all that this is. And Danny August Mason, I don't believe is going to be believing this, because I think at this point he's already under the assumption that he's being thrown under the bus, or in a sense double-crossed on this deal. And now we get into some very interesting chess moves that are being done here between these two individuals. So he's going to have him full producer credit on The Rise, which is fine. And then, by the way, we're going to move forward with this Gray State series. You can be cast as the lead role, which is a paid position. But he still says, I'd like to have this done. I'd like to have the release finished. You'll have every opportunity to continue to collaborate, he says, writing and producing episodes and retaining your cherished position as a co-creator of the original concept in the public eye, but I'll not be able to sign you on to any contracted roles until I have your signed release document. I would like to have it by December 16th, after which we would be free to discuss a future with Gray State that's more respectful to your talents as a paid professional. Now, this is a kind of this is the shot across the bow here, letting him know that he means business. He gives a deadline, a hard deadline of December 16th, and also says that if it's not back by then, the most you'll ever be as a paid professional or as in a role as an actor only. And so Danny August Mason puts 4 years of his time into this. Always has said he wanted to be the co-creator of the original concept, but until he signs this, he's not going to be anything. So this is December 9th at 4:50 p.m. David sends this to Danny August Mason. Now, if we remember the date, December 9th, is very important to have a post on Facebook that David Crowley writes. Keep in mind now, this is the same date. And I believe this is another chess move in this high-stakes game of essentially life or death. David writes, "Can you believe it? The Rise is almost done. I'm serious. She's coming out to be quite the looker. Can't wait to show you all, but I have to comb her hair for a few more weeks." Remember, this is The Rise now. Nothing to do with Gray State, the project or the feature film or the web series. This is The Rise, the documentary. Anyway, here's the important point. I'm quite serious about giving this film away. I have to come to abhor the AJ, which is Alex Jones, model of peddling DVDs as truth and cashing in on suckers. I have given this film years of my time, and I'm delighted for the opportunity to burn it down by giving it away. Hope you all share in the feeling. And so this is December 9th. Because Danny August Mason has not released and signed the release document, the entire Gray State project, the feature film with Meg or the web series, whatever it was, is on hold, and it's essentially tabled. The entire project is tabled. There's nothing they can do. They're in a holding pattern until they get this release document. Danny August Mason is refusing to sign it, so there's nothing more David can do. Now, David's spending his time, because he can't do anything on the project, by working on the final finishing touches of the documentary called The Rise. Now, he knows on December 9th when he sends this message out on Facebook, and remember, this is the Facebook post that gets deleted after the bodies are found. In the month of February 2015, this post off David Crowley's personal Facebook wall is surprisingly deleted by someone, and so he's really threatening here to give it away. Now, The Rise is a business. It's a documentary to be. The plan was to sell it, to sell the documentary, TV, Netflix, cable, what have you. Now he's talking about giving it away, which means no one's going to make any money on it. And this was I think done the same time to looking for a response to see what would it take to for Danny August Mason, knowing he's serious. He's serious about giving it away and giving him the deadline at the 16th. Now we move on to the 16th. Remember in the previous post, I'd like to have your release signed document here at the bottom in yellow. I would like to have it by December 16th. And so now we get to the 16th. No response, no signed document. And we get an email on December 16th from Danny Mason, knowing it's the deadline, a nice, friendly email saying, "Buddy, please give me a call about moving forward before I sign the release form." So now I've got evidence, once again, it still isn't signed, as he states it here, that it isn't signed. This is December 16th. So it gets to be very interesting here. We know that nothing ever comes of it. This is the last communication, I believe, between these two. And it leaves us all with an awkward feeling. David was going to release The Rise for free at the end of the year. I think it was December 30th or 31st was the self-imposed deadline to release it out there for free. And then that was going to be used as promotional material to garner interest and more fan interest for when this web series or movie comes out. So he wanted to get it out there. On Christmas, he wrote The Rise, I think 5-Day Countdown to Christmas, and that was to get that out. So these guys are still having their email correspondence back and forth as late as the 16th of December. Now, when we go to the police investigation into this case, I pulled up the interview with Daniel August Mason done with Officer Tommy Booth from the Apple Valley Police Department. And so highlighted here, he conducts his interview on the 19th of January. Keep in mind, this is 2 days after the bodies were found. Bodies were found on Saturday the 17th. The 18th was the Sunday, and now here was Monday in January, Martin Luther King holiday. The cleaners were in there cleaning the house professionally, and also various people were in that home when they found the bullet hole in the ceiling was also on January 19th with 4 or 5 other individuals that were in the house before it was professionally cleaned and released to the family. And so we talk about Mr. Mason here doing his interview with Tommy Booth. Talks about he met him when he met David when they started doing the concept trailer, and talks about bullet exchange. And so this is the interview. Now I'm going to go to the next section. It talks in the first paragraph there that they raised about $61,000 to help do the trailer, and so they made the trailer and pitched that. Remember, the movie was never made. The funding, the movie was never produced. They were going to get the funding first and get the contract and then make the movie. Now, the second paragraph here in yellow, Mr. Mason said his involvement with Gray State and Crowley was strictly as an actor and as a friend, but had not been involved in any financing or was actually listed on any paperwork as a partner with Crowley and Heil. So what I believe this comment to be here is very deceptive. One could call it a lie. One could call it actually the truth. But what I think it is actually is deceptive. Now we know from the paperwork and the offer and the counter offers going back and forth between this release agreement that Danny August Mason was heavily involved. In fact, sacrificing 4 years of his life to do this, and had ideas as being mentioned as the co-creator with the casting, the production, and the marketing of this entire project. And so he was actually in order for him to sign a release form, he had to be tied into this business in the first place. So the mere fact that he had to sign the release document shows that he was far more than just simply an actor in Gray State. Now, what Mr. Mason is telling the officer here is that he doesn't believe he's not listed on any paperwork as a partner with Crowley and Heil. Now, Mitch Heil is listed on the bullet exchange with David Crowley. And Danny August Mason is correct. He is not listed on any paperwork for the bullet exchange. He is listed on as Gray State LLC. So this is a deceptive line here to police saying I don't have any connections from a business standpoint to that project at all. I was merely an actor. Well, that's not true. That on its face is a lie. Not involved with any financing. That also is true. He wasn't involved in any financing, but he was listed very heavily involved in the Gray State. He goes on to say in the last paragraph there that they were in attendance in August at Randy's birthday. And remember, Randy's birthday party documentary from Eric Nelson called A Gray State mentions that there was some unease and it was an uncomfortable setting at Randy's birthday party in Apple Valley in August of 2014. Now that certainly would be the case because of the release statements were sent out. David had a deal that he couldn't tell anyone about, so that's why I think it was quiet and was awkward. He also had sent out release agreement paperwork with Mitch Heil and Danny August Mason, and Mason was at the party. How uncomfortable would that be? So yes, there was some uncomfortable feelings there at that birthday party that no one really could let on. David had a deal that he didn't let on to anyone else even. Him and Comel were the only ones who knew there was a deal in place. Let's go to the next segment. Danny August Mason goes on to say in yellow highlight here, the last time Mr. Mason saw David Crowley was in September, but he could not remember the exact date in September. He goes on to say that he had come over to the Crowley's residence to talk to David concerning the movie and where the movie was heading. Then talked to David out in the driveway of the residence and stated that, quote, David had looked like he had lost a bunch of weight and was fragile. So there's two questions here that I have. We know that the release form was sent sometime in August with an August effective date, or even the end of July with an August effective date. Danny August Mason was there in attendance at the August birthday party, but after that, it appears they were on emailing correspondence only. I don't see any evidence to support that Danny August Mason went and talked to him on the driveway. This already was heading down on the end of September, down an ugly path with this counteroffer being sent in response back to David Crowley, wanting the rights, making the demands about the Rise documentary. But feel free in the comments section of this video below, if there was proof or evidence that Danny August Mason actually went there and talked to him in the driveway. Now, the other thing, which I think is also being deceitful here from Danny Mason, is that it says David looked like he lost a bunch of weight and was fragile. This, I believe, is the first insertion of a narrative where they're trying to make the police and the detectives and the investigators think that David Crowley became unhinged, was not himself, was isolating himself, going so far here to say that he lost a bunch of weight and was fragile. This, I believe, is an outright lie. But please leave your comments below. This is, I think this is planting the seed for the investigators to think, you know what, maybe David did do this. Now, the next section here in the police interview, they talk about after the September meeting, which I don't believe ever took place. Mason states that he received an email on the 1st of October from the attorney. The email was asking Mason to release any rights he had, on, and he said he wanted to review it with his attorney before he signed anything. That very well could be true. I don't think Danny August Mason had any intention of signing that, regardless if he had an attorney look at it or not. Now he says that on December 7th, he received an email directly from Crowley, stating that he decided to take it in a different path, and he needed to sign a release form. And attached was that release form from October 1st. He said he needs his attorney to look it over, and, quote, in yellow, December 7th was the last contact Mr. Mason had with David Crowley or anyone in his family. Now, we know that's not true. The last contact was December 16th of 2014 from Danny Mason to David Crowley. So December 7th, last contact is outright lie. Now, the very last paragraph here gets into more of the cunning, more of the psychological deceit here from Danny August Mason. During the interview with police, Mr. Mason then asks the officer, Tommy Booth, asked me if I had talked to Mitch Heil yet concerning David Crowley. So now he's steering the conversation. He's basically done with talking about himself, and then quickly steers the conversation to the other business partner named Mitch Heil. I advised him that I had not, and Mr. Mason was kind enough to give me his phone number so that he can contact him. He says he believed that they dissolved their partnership and ended on good terms. That's true, and that happened in September, October of 2014. That also is true. I think that was either August or even September. Certainly wasn't October. They had the garage sale already in September. So that is, for the most part, true. But watch how Danny Mason is steering the conversation with the investigator onto other topics. Here he goes out of his way to focus the attention on Mitch Heil and essentially wrap up the interview. Mr. Mason then goes on to describe Crowley as a very loving man towards his family. He was in the military, didn't know what belief system he had, and goes out of his way to leave the door open for any further contacts by telling him he could contact him with any further questions. What a nice guy. Now, the interesting thing is here, we have Mr. Mason's interview recorded on the digital recorder and downloaded to the secure server at the Apple Valley Police Department. That would be something interesting to get the FOIA request for that interview, whether it's for this case or on the Crowley investigation case, or later if police were to pursue charges of lying here to investigators. That certainly is recorded and saved on the server, as there's various lies here by Danny August Mason directly to investigators. That's the update for today. It's the Crowley case updates, November 24th of 2018. The curious case of Danny August Mason. Please leave your comments below. Thanks for listening. Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is April 25th, 2019, and I'll be providing a broadcast on the Crowley case updates. Tonight's episode is called The Curious Case of Dan Crowley Sr. The Crowleys were found January in 2015. David Crowley, his wife Comel, and their daughter Ronnie. And so after that point, the police concluded their investigation a year later and concluded that David Crowley killed his daughter, his wife, and then ultimately killed himself. And that is where we are today. The case is closed. Apple Valley Police detectives are not interested in reopening it, regardless of what is provided to them. So about a year ago, the phone records were released from AT&T from the mobile phones of the family members, and tonight's episode is going to be going over a little bit of the phone records of what was documented as evidence of the phone records relating to David Crowley himself, and some commentary that was provided to law enforcement from David's father, Dan Crowley Sr. So let's get into it. On page 64 of the 94-page police report from the Apple Valley Police Department, we see the following timeline put together by the Crowley family, submitted by Dan Crowley Sr. Presented this timeline to Apple Valley detectives to put together the various texts and responses back and forth from the communications, from the alleged communication between David and his father, Dan Sr. So here's what we get. I'll read them through. Early November, DJ, that's Dan Jr., that's David's older brother, Dan Jr. DJ texted David saying he loves him and would like to make things right. No response. November 7th, I text David to see if he's still alive, after finding he gave DJ his new phone number. And remember, in October, David Crowley and Comel each get new phone numbers with a new account and a cell phone subscription with AT&T. After canceling their old service, they now have a new one. November 8th, he replies that everything is great. Family life had swept them away. I reply, how are the negotiations going with the producers? He replied on November 9th, I walked from it. Reasons of the spirit, I guess. November 16th, I asked him to join us at my sister's for Thanksgiving. November 18th, he replied that they wanted to stay home this year, but thanks. So this is the testimony Dan Crowley Sr. provides the law enforcement. And so what I'm going to do is highlight each one of these and then compare it with the notes. Now the AT&T phone record log, I've got a screenshot image right here of the texts that were sent and received from David Crowley's phone number with his new AT&T phone line. It shows the text coming in and the text going out. There's a lot of them here. It's 3 pages long, and I think there's a total of 77 texts David sends and or receives in this 3-month period, from October, from getting the phone, to November, to December, and then they end in December 24th is the very last text communication, and authorities believe the bodies were, the murders took place the 25th or 26th of this December, right around Christmas time of 2014. So all of these items mention the date range for these items are all November, beginning of November all the way through to the 18th. So what I'm going to do, not to make it too confusing for folks watching this broadcast, we're not going to go through all these. I'm just going to strip through the items that relate to the text activity for David Crowley in the month of November only. And here they are. If you see the line items on the AT&T bill on the far left, item lines 59 through 74 are connectivity dates for texts that range from November 3rd through November 22nd. And what follows on the next page is all items in December, which is not part of tonight's broadcast. So we're just focusing on November only. So first item here is early November, DJ texts David saying he loves him, wants to make things right. Incoming text, early November. Well, we know Dan Crowley's phone number, and we can see the in and outgoing communications here. Let's focus only on the incoming. I've got the incoming texts. There's, I think there's 12 of them. The first texts coming in are November 3rd, November 4th, and November 8th, it appears. So beginning of November, I'm guessing it's one of those 3 that are coming in. And so I'm going to pull up the spreadsheet of a simple version of these first 3 coming in. We can see the first 3 coming in from an individual named Richard Benedetti from Illinois. A couple of those coming in from him. Also, the beginning of the month was Zach Carter, a gentleman in Washington. So I don't see any support, any evidence to support a text coming in from DJ, which is Dan Jr. No response. So I would have to. I don't believe there's any support for that first item. Let's go to the second item. November 7th. I text David to see if he's still alive after giving DJ his new phone number. So let's go to November 7th. Incoming text. There is no incoming text. We see one on the 4th, and then and not again until the 8th. So I don't see anything there to support a text. This is coming from Dan Sr., wondering if he's still alive. Now, this also may be planting the seed of to the investigators that he was depressed, despondent, and what have you. But I don't believe there's support that exists for this text at all. November 8th, looks like David replies, everything's great, family had swept them away. And then Dan Sr., the father, replies, how are the negotiations going with the producers? So we get an incoming and an outgoing on the 8th. We do see some incoming and outgoing on the 8th. In fact, 4 of them in the blocked area here, right in the middle. There's 4.
Now we're going to look at BCA 4464. You can definitely see part of Camille. And the interesting thing is that rip. You can see the tear right there. You can see how close David's body is where the Santa Claus ornament is. That's where David's body is. So the sweat's where the rip is. I think that's going to be one of the big keys there. You see a little blue bandana. That's where Rania was. So I don't know. Maybe her head was there where this couch was. Somebody's head was there, I believe. Starting to make more sense that it's Rania. In the lower right corner, you also do see those footprints. And in the lower right corner, you can see the blood splatter, the blood spray, and even some dog feces. You can also see that there too. Another interesting thing is, looks like what might be a second backpack on the table in the back as well. This also gives us another angle